JT Alexander asks, where's the best landing spot for Zach LaVine in free agency, and will he get a max? My feeling is he will stay with the Bulls, but interested to see what happens with him this offseason. Yeah, so the Brian Windhorst of the Hoop Collective, I did not listen to that podcast yet, but I did see the aggregation quote making the rounds of Portland popping up as a potential Zach LaVine destination. I don't get it. I don't like you decided to move on from CJ McCollum and Norman Powell so that you could pair Damian Lillard with Anthony Simons and Zach LaVine. A younger, peppier pair of running mates, but like you have made your defense like laterally, like that the lateral defense. That'd be very curious. Like, but it's a fit, but is it like a much better one than what just happened? I do not know. To Zach LaVine's contract, though, as of right now, unless I have my max contracts wrong, the Bulls can give him 5 years and $212.3 million. Outside teams can give him 4 years, $157.4 million. That's obviously a massive difference. With that being said, we know how this works. Players are getting to free agency sooner. They can recoup that money elsewhere. LaVine is only 27, just turned it in March. He could sign a 4-year deal with that 4th-year player option and then set himself up for one more longer-term deal when he would just be wrapping up his, I think that would have been his age, it wouldn't even be his age 30 season by that point if it's after 3 years, right? So he could go that route. I personally expect him to re-sign with the Bulls. That is just a lot of money. He has had some injury stuff throughout his career as well. And Chicago has every incentive to give him the max. So they can't, play cute in this scenario. They have no leverage here. They made the consolidation trade for Nikola Vucevic. They went out and they signed a trade for DeMar DeRozan. You can talk, okay, if you're going to begin a transitional era, you can have Alex Cruz, Alonzo Ball. It doesn't really change the complexion of those deals. Some people have wondered whether they held on to Patrick Williams past the trade deadline or didn't go all in yet again because they weren't sure how the Zach LaVine free agency would play out. Perhaps that factors into the equation. If he leaves, it's because he doesn't want to be in Chicago anymore, though, because if you're the Bulls, you have to max him out. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts here. Maybe you don't think he'd be the best player in a title contender. It doesn't matter. Put yourself in a position where you need to offer him the max. For laughs and giggles, though, if we were talking about where Zach LaVine should go, and I'm just throwing market out of the equation. So anyone who's like rooting for the Lakers to come in with picks and Westbrook in a sign and trade, one, the hard cap is a thing, and that just gets like almost impossibly workable in that scenario. But I'm just looking at teams, basketball, that would be quality basketball fits here. So Portland comes up. I'm just listing them because of what Windhorst said. I've also seen some people maybe entertain the idea of Atlanta. What's interesting about the Hawks is I feel like people are too worried about the minutes Atlanta spends without Trae Young or getting him moving without the ball. I understand how important that can be. But one, they did cobble together lineups with Bogdanovich this year that did not have Trae Young, that were effective, that were net pluses, and that survived on offense. And then I just don't know, like, what does your defense look like if you have Zach LaVine and Trae Young? Okay, great. You have Trae Young, get him moving off the ball in the postseason. Is that like what you want to funnel another max slot towards with Trae Young's extension kicking in? You also have to go the route of a sign and trade with Chicago. I do think you have players, picks, prospects. Just looking at DeAndre Hunter, you have this salary matching fodder if it's a John Collins. You have Gallinari's partially guaranteed salary for next year if you really want to go that route as well. So there are mechanisms through which you can build a sign and trade. I just don't know if this is the player to consolidate into for a team like Atlanta. And that also just brings up the larger issue for Atlanta. What does a consolidation trade look like? What should that player be? We got into that a little bit with Keith Smith from Spotrac on the last podcast. So go check that out. I really liked San Antonio in large part because DeJounte Murray had the guts, the gall to go on Twitter and post a Photoshop picture of Zach LaVine in a Spurs jersey. He did delete it. But look, I think you could probably make a case that San Antonio needs defensive clarity more than offensive clarity right now. But they don't have an off-the-dribble shot maker like Zach LaVine, let alone one who can just toggle between off-ball and on-ball responsibilities like he does, like he has, like he can. I would love to see him there. Man, and just the way the Spurs have played, like where they haven't been afraid to downsize, so there's a little bit more like positionless stuff going on there under head coach Greg Popovich. Pop might have like mini coronaries with some of Zach LaVine shot selections, but he makes tough jumpers, and he's someone who is going to pull defenses away when he doesn't have the ball. Put him beside DeJounte Murray in the backcourt, surround him with Devin Vassell, having Jakob Poeltl on the back line. Like your defense, we've already seen Chicago when they were at full strength. Their defense was pretty good with Zach LaVine on the court for long stretches. You can play a hyper aggressive style with some of that personnel too. Maybe things get a little bit iffy depending on how you feel about Keldon Johnson then, but there are just so many different lineups that you could build out here. And he's just young enough to where it fits the motif of what San Antonio is almost doing right now, where they're building, but they're not fully rebuilding. They are one of the teams, one of the very few teams that has a boatload of cap space this summer. It is not quite to LaVine's max. I think they can pretty effortlessly get to like 29 plus million to make up the difference there, though. When you're talking about Zach LaVine's max on the open market is going to be 30.5 million. That's, or should be 36. Boy, I was off there. 36.6 million. Excuse me. I was looking at the wrong column. You have to probably get into the conversation of, okay, if you have the foresight, you can just waive Zach Collins' deal. And I believe that would just about get you there. But then you also would have to look at, okay, renouncing Lonnie Walker. That's already part of this. Can we find a taker for Romeo Langford? And so you get into moves like that. They could do it if they wanted to, or maybe there's just another sign and trade to be had between Chicago and San Antonio. The other two teams actually I really like for Zach LaVine. This one's kind of a no-brainer. Dallas would have to be another sign and trade as well. What gets difficult with them too is that they are like, you would be hard capped, and to stay under the apron for them is not a non-challenge as of right now. And this is without them having any major offseason decisions to make. It's assuming that they guarantee Maxi Kleber's salary, which Trey Burke picks up his player option. Maybe they don't bring back Frank Ntilikina, but right now they are very close to the apron for next season. I think they're within like just a few $1,000,000. And so that doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room when you are brokering a sign and trade, because you have to stay under that luxury tax apron, which next season I believe is set at $155.7 million roughly. That changes. If it goes lower, it makes it even harder. If it goes higher, it makes it slightly easier for them. And again, there are some things they could do, but what are you offering here is just like, okay, your first round pick in this year's draft, 26, then you can't technically convey a future first round pick until 2025, since your 2023 first is owed to New York. Anyone listening to this podcast knows that they would be trading this year's pick after the fact that it happened. That's how you get around the Stepien rule there. But like, what else if you're trading Zach LaVine or Chicago, do you want distant first round picks in 25, 27? Like, let's say they're going full boat and they'll do 25, 27, and 29 or whatever, all the swaps in the world. Does that actually appeal to you? It might if you're rebuilding. It probably won't if you're trying to compete with DeMar and Nikola Vucevic there. And if Zach LaVine does leave, I do wonder what that would spell for the Bulls. That's a different conversation. Yes, Dallas has salary matching tools to make such a transaction work, but is Chicago really going to want Spencer Dinwiddie? Or are they really going to want Davis Bertans or Dwight Powell, Reggie Bullock? You would give up Maxi Kleber on a deal for Zach LaVine, I'm sure, as much as it stings. There's just not even like, there's no one who's very headliney there. Dorian Finney-Smith, I'm sure they would covet. That'd be interesting. Is that a deal breaker for Dallas? Zach LaVine is clearly the better player, but Dorian Finney-Smith has been so important to what you've done defensively, and he's on what is going to end up being, I think, one of the better deals in the league. He signed that 4-year, $56 million extension. Is there a Jalen Brunson double sign and trade to be had if you're getting rid of Zach LaVine in Chicago? I guess that's something that they could look at. Finding a workable package, though, is tough. I love the idea of Zach LaVine, though, in Dallas, someone who gives them more of a traditional number two, where you're not seeing Jalen Brunson hit all these off the dribble jumpers. Like, he needs to get going downhill. And even with Spencer Dinwiddie a little bit, Zach LaVine is someone who brings that element. I think also with him, you probably get Luka moving off the ball even more than we've seen. And I do think I should really look at numbers to back this up, since this has been my opinion on the eye test. I could just be wrong. It does feel like Dallas has done a better job than Atlanta with Trae Young and getting Luka off the ball a little bit more this season. Zach LaVine sort of incentivizes you to do that even more. And it's different from the Atlanta situation in the sense that Atlanta probably has the more attractive sign and trade package here. That being said, their defense is not good enough to just bring in Zach LaVine, pair him with Trae Young and say, like, okay, we'll be fine. Dallas was, I think, finished 6th or 7th per Cleveland Glass in points allowed per possession this season. And they have more quality defenders there. You're looking at Bullock, Kleba, and then, of course, Dorian Finney-Smith. And the way that they were defending on live balls, Jason Kidd having them get back in transition. I think you can be a little bit more comfortable adding a player of Zach LaVine's caliber and thinking that, hey, we're closer or at the title contention ceiling. Whereas with Atlanta, I don't know that's what he does. My final team might be my favorite team is Memphis. He has to want to go to Memphis. I understand that. Memphis has to want him, and spending big on outside talent wouldn't be their MO post Chandler Parsons era contract. That being said, just look at this team. Look at what they've done. The fight they put up against Golden State in game 4 without Ja Morant. There's an ugliness to their offense, and that's fine. You want to hit the offensive glass. You want to get out in transition. And then you're going to lean on Ja Morant. Zach LaVine gives you a half-court creator, unlike any other one that you have right now, including Ja Morant. I'm not saying he's necessarily better now or in the long term, but Ja Morant is not hitting these difficult off-the-dribble threes or fades. Like, he's trying to get to the rim, hitting his floaters, is getting better at punishing defenses when they're going under screens. Fantastic player. Zach LaVine just gives you a different element of a half-court creator, and it takes a lot of stress off of a Desmond Bane or a Jaren Jackson Jr. on any given night. And those aren't guys who I think are overtaxed to begin with. Certainly not Triple J. When Ja Morant's healthy, maybe Desmond Bane a little bit. Is there an effect where you have like the Maxi Kleba type, scorching heater from Desmond Bane after Zach LaVine comes in, where he was already great in the most improved conversation, but then someone comes along who makes his job even easier, makes it tougher for defenses to key in on him, and he just absolutely goes kaboom. I don't think that Memphis would go this route. They can technically carve out a boatload of cap space if they wish. It's not nearly as much as San Antonio, but it can be in the $20 million range. You have to renounce both Tyus Jones and Kyle Anderson to do that. That gets, I don't think they're going to look to get rid of both of those guys. I'm sure they'll pinch pennies somewhere, and they'll be, maybe ultra conservative in how they're spending. They're going to want to keep at least one of those guys. That's also too big of a difference to make up for Zach LaVine's max. Like, now you're getting into, double digit salary dumps where it's getting rid of DeAnthony Melton and Dillon Brooks. It would have to be, via sign and trade. And look, they can offer interesting package for that. They have first round picks to spare. They've Utah's this year plus their own. They have Golden State's top 4 protected in 2024. You can build a lot of stuff, a lot of different packages with that. Looking at actual players they can include in that scenario, I don't think the cutoff is Desmond Bane. And by that, I mean, you're not giving up Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, or Jaren Jackson Jr. in any deal. Like, that's just where you're at. Would I give up Zaire Williams, who I'm officially high on after not really knowing much about him leading into the draft and then thinking it was a whatever move by the Grizzlies? Very much like him. You give him up in a heartbeat for Zach LaVine. If you're pairing him with picks and then salary filler, you can't necessarily afford your Steven Adams' money fits right into that equation, but you do have Dillon Brooks. Maybe Chicago values that, just bringing some defensive toughness if they can sort of live through him thinking that he's the greatest offensive player alive on 8 to 35 offensive possessions per game. They have DeAnthony Melton as well. And so you could step ladder your way to that contract. And then maybe if you have some space, use that to fall back on. The sign and trade number does get a little difficult because if you're not including Steven Adams, as of right now, he is your highest paid player next season. Your second highest paid player is Dillon Brooks at $11.4 million. There's a chance that Jaren Jackson Jr.'s deal kicks in. My sheets are not sorted. So he's your highest paid player. You're not getting rid of him. Steven Adams is second at 17.9. Then you have Ja Morant at 12.1. And then Dillon Brooks is 11.4. So the salaries get not on the lower end, but lower middle end pretty quickly. And some of the best, in theory, money matchers, Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., you're not getting rid of those guys. And if you move Steven Adams, I think we've seen that the Grizzlies can play without him. You are then tasked with trying to find another big. And why would Chicago necessarily want him? They do have Vooch there if they're not rebuilding post Zach LaVine. If you can find a way to get to Memphis, though, and if a player wanted to go there, you could probably include enough picks if you're Memphis to make it worth Chicago's while. They have Brandon Clark as well. So there are interesting players there. If push came to shove and Chicago really wanted Desmond Bane, I think it's a discussion. As of right now, I don't think and it's not that Zach LaVine is not more valuable than Desmond Bane. Maybe some would argue that on Zach LaVine's next contract, he won't be more valuable than Desmond Bane. But is Zach LaVine going to make you a surefire championship contender? There's the case to be made, but it's not on the same just level of a no-brainer. So I would explore it, but you're probably looking at a situation where the Grizzlies won't give up if they were even willing to do it. Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant, of course, those are the obvious ones. And then or Desmond Bane. That was a great question, though. Zach LaVine's free agency or Bradley Beal's free agency is maybe the best chance we have at some star level drama this summer. There's a very real chance Jalen Brunson is just the best free agent that realistically switches teams. Maybe Bradley Beal grows disenchanted with Washington, or they decide to pivot elsewhere. Does Phoenix get super cheap under Robert Sarver when it comes to paying DeAndre Ayton what will inevitably be a max contract? I do not know. We'll have to see how free agency plays out, but it does feel like as of now, unless they address this in the next CBA, that there might not be as much superstar movement in free agency, that this is all just going to continue to play out on the trade market.